Bartholomew Town, brought to you in part by the University of Rhode Island Online, Navigant Credit Union, Half Street Group, and Newport Film.
Bartholomew Town.
It's Bartholomew Town, and once again, as we are in September, it's time to highlight something that has been an incredibly impactful series of programs over it. Certainly when I was a student at the University of Rhode Island, I don't want to say when because that'll date me, but it's been a while, but the Honors Colloquium was a huge component of just sort of elevating ideas and connecting people, be it students, be it community members, be it professors, be it those who are coming to offer a keynote or just a presentation of any kind, in an environment where those ideas are able to flourish and you're surrounded by people who care in some cases quite deeply about the subject matter, or at least have a cursory interest. And the great thing about the Honors Colloquium is that you don't have to be a student to feel the impact here. There's a lot of community programs that are open to the community. This year's theme, extraordinarily timely. This year's Honors Colloquium, Education Behind the Curtains. And it's going to kick off with a public lecture series on September 16th with Miguel Cardona. He's the former Secretary of Education, and he's going to take a look at the evolving public education landscape. And it is something that is extraordinarily evolution-centric at this moment in time, and a lot of major questions as to where we go from here. AI is a huge part of that. Educational infrastructure is a huge part of that, and just the general philosophy behind education and what our ultimate goals are. I guess the best thing to do to associate the human and the voices, we'll have our guests introduce themselves and explain their role here. We'll start with Dan.
So, hello, everybody. Dan Kelly. I'm an associate teaching professor at the University of Rhode Island. This is my third year. We're starting my third year here at URI. Before that, I was a high school principal and assistant principal. I've taught and been an administrator in 3 or 4 different states. And so this topic is very, very timely and very near and dear to my heart. When I got started at URI, I started the first courses I taught was Introduction to American Education, and I got to teach an honor section of that. And so this is kind of the next evolution of my teaching and continuing these great conversations about what's working and what's not working in our K through 20 education space.
Mm-hmm. And that's a very important way to put it, that K through 20 education space. That's the right context to frame this, no doubt about it, as another example of evolution in education. Lazaro, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bill. Lazaro Camacho Jr., he, him, él. I'm an assistant professor of college student personnel and program coordinator for our master's in college student personnel program in the College of Education. Our work is primarily geared towards training emerging student affairs practitioners to support student success in post-secondary education environments. So many of the folks that you might see in a variety of spaces and places across colleges and universities who support students in their success, that's the work that we strive for. This is my 5th year here at URI in the College of Ed. Prior to that, I was a long-time student affairs professional doing much of the work that I was just describing. And I think this work, like Dan, is near and dear to me because much of the work we do in higher education, post-secondary education, is really about understanding sort of what's happening in the now and how that will inform what's going to happen in the future. And so this contemporary notion of education as a fundamental sort of important space, I think, is an exciting opportunity to cover as a part of the colloquium.
No doubt about it. So from a thematic standpoint, education behind the curtains, you can go a lot of different directions there. I guess each of you, if you want to expound on just from a baseline level, when you hear that phrase or when you've coined that phrase potentially, what does that mean to you? We'll start with Dan.
Yeah, so our graphic for this event is literally a curtain, and it's kind of slightly opened up a little bit, and you can kind of see a computer and a couple of books and an old school desk from like the 1950s. And I think in my experiences, everybody went to school, so everybody thinks they have a clear idea of what's happening there because they went through it. But education is very, very different. Our K-12s, even our colleges are very different than they were 20, 30, 40 years ago when some of our parents and some of our community members went through schools. And it's very easy for folks to say, well, we just got to go back to the way it was. And in this, in 2025, we're not going back. We're not removing the technology. We're not removing the AI. We're not removing Google and all those things. And so our goal is really just to get a better glimpse into what's happening in our schools currently in 2025.
Same question, Lazaro.
Yeah, so I think education is one of those spaces that many folks are familiar with, regardless of the context or the situation. Uh, Folks have gone through at least in this country, folks have gone through public education in some very similar ways, whether, like to Dan's point, it was 20 years ago or yesterday. But I think to that end, they make a lot of assumptions about what's going on, what's happening, for better or worse, right? There's lots of really great opinions, a lot of maybe opinions that have an opportunity to be informed by colloquiums like the ones that we're supporting today. And so for me, it's really about pulling back the curtain and saying, look at all this fantastic work that's happening. Look at all this really great opportunities of collaboration and partnership, and what that looks like across a spectrum of education. And I think that's one of the things that's really important about this idea of pulling education behind the curtain. It's that while we might understand it in some very specific ways, it's this really integrated spectrum of opportunities that I think folks will benefit from learning more about.
It's interesting because we spend so much time in standardized test reflection. We spend so much time comparing and contrasting here in Rhode Island. Oftentimes the standard bearer is Massachusetts. So we end up from a proximity standpoint and from an outcome standpoint saying, hey, here's what Massachusetts did. Perfect example of compare and contrast as well. The data that just came out on absenteeism in Rhode Island, where, look, the numbers, they've improved in the last several years, but they've also not returned to pre-pandemic chronic absentee levels. And it's a disturbing trend. And there's been some adjustments made by the McKee administration, some program initiatives, his attendance matters initiative in particular. But are we measuring the right things right now when it comes to how we look at education, or are we getting caught up in something that is just kind of a dog chasing its own tail?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've often been frustrated by the extreme focus on a test score. I've often said to students and to families, don't let one number define who you are as a learner. Don't let one number define who you are as a person, as a future employee. And so there is a lot of emphasis on it. And it's important. There are metrics that we need to look at, and we need to be judging those metrics. But I don't think it needs to be the be all end all. Showing up and being in class, that's important. And I appreciate what the commissioner and the governor have done with the attendance matters since COVID. That was a huge battle for me as a principal. But I also think it's also incumbent on us as principals and as teachers and as communities to think differently about what we're putting out in our K-12 classrooms, especially, and also at the college level. Is it relevant to students in 2025? We cannot continue to have this same model of 180 days, and we get our there's a lot to think about and a lot to think about changing, but those conversations are difficult. And what I have found is that people like to hold on to traditions and they don't want to get rid of those. And I think we need to have more of those difficult conversations to make sure we're meeting the needs of our learners today.
No doubt. Similar question, Lazaro, on are we measuring the right stuff here? Are we assessing the assessing? Is the assessing the correct areas?
Yeah, so I think I'll defer to my colleague and friend Dan on everything K through 12. He is the expert in that space, and so I'll touch on this from a higher ed, post-secondary education sort of context. But maybe not, right? And I think what we really have to think about, particularly as it pertains, I think education across the purpose of higher education. Is it a workforce development tool? Is it to create global citizens who are committed to their communities and their institutions of service? And I think there's plenty of literature, and I think plenty of folks will speak to the notion that it's spread across those two spaces in different ways based on different needs. And so I think to best answer that question, we have to think about where are we moving towards into the future? What are the needs of society? What are the needs of individuals to be able to participate in that society in ways that are beneficial, in ways that are equitable? And so I think one of the ideas that comes to mind is, so I won't speak to absenteeism, but I'll speak to like letter grades, and this might be a little contentious for some folks. But what does learning mean, right? And what does a grade represent? I think we have to have we have to have standards in place to show achievement and understanding. But what does a letter grade entail? What does that mean in terms of the learning that an individual has gained, and how they're able to sort of contribute to society in ways that are beneficial to themselves, but also I think beneficial to folks at large. So I think it depends on context. I think in some places maybe we're not. In some places, I think we're having some really smart ideas about how to think about that. Particularly as I think about what Dan was saying about AI and some of these tools that we're integrating into the work. This is good for society. It's just a matter of sort of making smart choices and decisions about how to utilize it in appropriate ways to achieve those goals that we have.
I had an experience earlier. Please, Dan, if you want to follow up on that, actually, please.
I just, we also have to be listening to our students more about
right.
what they want and what their needs are. And so I remember years ago, the state assessment, we shifted to be more like Massachusetts, and we made it a graduation requirement. And there was all kinds of great conversations and pushback at the time. And my scores went up significantly, and people started asking questions. Oh, you must have done something wrong. No, the test mattered. And so kids took it seriously. And so I think we've got to be listening to kids, because an SAT doesn't necessarily, that score shouldn't be the be all end all. And I don't know if college needs to be the be all end all either. One of the topics we're going to talk about in this colloquium is we're going to look at some of Mike Rowe's work and when we talk about career and technical education. We have a problem in our country filling the trades. Mm-hmm. And I think that Rhode Island is leading that conversation around CTE, and I think we should be commended for that and continue to celebrate that work. But we still have a problem with kids wanting to get into those trades and do that type of work. And there's a lot of money to be made in that work too. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh no, please.
If I may expand that idea, I think one of the things that I think that idea of, so that ties right into this idea of what are the needs of society, what are the needs of individuals, how do those come together in really important ways. But I also want to, and I don't think Dan is inferring this at all, but I want to make sure that we don't have there isn't trade and career technical education is post-secondary education, right? It is an opportunity for individuals post high school graduation, post GED credentialing, those sort of things. And so I think one of the things that we're trying to be really mindful of, and Dan and I have had this conversation multiple times as we are coordinating this process, is this doesn't have to be a if-or scenario, right? Nothing's mutually exclusive. And I think these opportunities work well in collaboration with each other. And so we're excited for bringing those ideas to folks who maybe didn't see those connections previously, both in the classroom and the folks who will be attending our public lectures.
I had an opportunity at the end of last academic year. I was invited to be a judge in Framingham Public Schools for a program that took place one day per week after school, where students chose, it was I guess you'd call it a club, and the program was basically taking United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and turning those into a combination of, through design and AI and through sort of just pure creativity, creating an app concept that would have an impact on the world and have an impact on contemporaries of these kids, which were aged really 14 through 17. So I was a judge at this event, and to see these kids and the level of not only creativity that was being deployed, but their command of things that I think a lot of us, being anybody over the age of 26 or something like that, are still trying to figure out. And knowing, okay, yeah, never mind ChatGPT, we know how to integrate AI in a way that you don't even necessarily know it's there. We've just normalized this because we've been working on this for a year, and we have a concept of how this is going to impact the world from a sustainability standpoint, and we have a practical understanding of an economic standpoint. So you're watching these kids churn through computer science, you're watching them churn through English and communications, you're watching them churn through mathematics and business. And again, this is Framingham. This is a district that has a lot of kids who are struggling in the traditional classroom setting, yet I'm watching them and I'm thinking, there's no way I can judge this properly because all of these ideas are amazing. And these kids know so much more about this arena than anybody that I know, including people who work in tech. So it's a lot of times getting outside of the box, introducing something. Credit to Framingham School District and the administration up there I had a chance to talk to, trying different stuff and leaning into what the kids want to work on. Those kids are smart and they're ready to attack the world no matter how they score on the MCAS. Your thoughts on alternative programming, and I guess that includes some of these startup AI-driven homeschools, because that's in the equation as well. But broadly speaking, as we move into a new era, how do we think outside of the box without losing some of those traditional roots that always work, like community building and one-on-one human-to-human educational content?
Lazaro, I'll let you go first this time.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really fantastic question because it speaks to some really fundamental things some really fundamental ideas when it comes to educational planning, educational programming, and I think it's this idea that these ideas around community building, these ideas around interdisciplinary approaches are fundamental to the work. I think there was a time in education where these were sort of new skills, new ideas, new opportunities. Maybe at one point, we were sort of very technical driven, right? Like what are the technical skills that one needs to be really successful? And so we see, the advent of coding and computer science and STEM and things of that nature. But then we said to ourselves, well, folks don't know how to talk to each other, or folks don't know how to have conversations, or folks don't know how to sort of create in a way that's collaborative. And so we realize these ideas are also fundamental to the technical skills. And so I think what we're finding is that we're in a place where we realize that at the fundamental foundational level of the work we do, and why it'll be useful, why it'll be helpful, and why that's so important to education, is that ideas like community building, ideas like communication, all the things that we might have called soft skills at one point in our life are things that really need to be fundamental to the education experience and the educational opportunity. And so I think we're having this full circle moment, maybe, where we're realizing you shouldn't have one without the other, and what does it mean to have a more holistic approach to educational policy, educational training, educational planning.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. Any thoughts on that, Dan?
I love how you celebrated those kids in Framingham. They were bright, they were engaged, because they were connected to something. They had something that was of interest to them. And I go back to questioning: is the current model sometimes, do we have? This is the debate I love to have in one of my classes. Do we need to teach Shakespeare in 2025? Is that relevant? We go back to it's the canon and it's important. But do you need to have Shakespeare, every year of your 4 years of high school? Is it relevant at these days? So I think we've got to celebrate. We have really bright kids. Our kids are being educated at the highest level ever in our country. 30 years ago at my old high school, we ran one section of calculus. When I left, we had multiple sections of calculus, probability and statistics, and they were all getting college credit. And so I think we're quick sometimes in society to say, oh, these kids. But they're very bright, and I think we've got to, again, come back to, are we listening to them? And when we throw in this whole AI thing in here, I don't think we're going to lose that relationship piece. I don't think AI is going to take over. I'm curious to see how some of these AI schools out west are going to develop, but they're still embedding the relationship piece into that. I don't think that goes away, because I still think that's the most important part of this whole teaching process.
Yeah, it'll be definitely something to monitor, particularly in Texas, and as the AI schools out there. And even this morning, I heard the education commissioner on an interview, and she was asked, I think and hope facetiously, whether or not we need to go back to the age of the nuns. But the question went on and on for longer than one would assume a facetious question would. And you're thinking, wow, there are people out there who really think that level of discipline is going to motivate students to come to school and get down to business, the more militarized version of it. And I'm here to say that there's no way on earth. I'm not around a ton of youth, but I know a lot of teachers, and I'm around some youth in the arts space where I'm involved in, and in youth sports and things like that. There's no way that is the direction we should be going in any way, shape, or form. So it's meeting them in a way that gets them motivated and disciplined and connected, but also not through hitting people in the face with rulers. So
yeah, we don't want to go back to that.
No.
And the discipline, I had that. I went to a Catholic school for a few years. So I remember those days. But we're very quick to say, something bad happens in a school. well, just throw that kid out. That kid needs to be expelled. I heard that a lot as a principal. Just expel the kid.
Yeah.
Well, one, we're not allowed to by state law,
Right.
and two, how does that help the kid? And yes, I think we've got to shift some conversation back to around the discipline question and how we're handling those things. But I don't think the stick works. And suspensions. You send a kid home and suspend him, they're going home to play video games. If I were to get suspended, I would have gotten my butt beat and then had to go work for my father. I wouldn't be able to sit at home. And so again, worlds are a little different, and we can't compare how we were raised 30 years ago to what the kids are facing currently.
Yeah. And I appreciate Dan saying that, because I think there's also this opportunity, and we talk a lot about this with our master's students in the field of higher education, student affairs at large. But what does it mean to be in a space of collaborative learning? What does it mean to empower individuals and this idea of agency, right? I know for some folks, this idea of, what is this sort of higher level, or what is this notion of why are we getting so focused on these ideas around sort of self-empowerment and agency? But I think to all the points that Dan just made, it's about how do we empower students to have a voice? How do we empower them to share with us what it is? I think, and at the risk of getting too technical, but it harkens back to these Freirean ideas around, the educator and the student as folks who come together in a classroom, and we try to do away with power dynamics in ways that are harmful to students, right? And so I think a lot of what Dan, and I think one of the things that I think I would love to see as a part of this conversation is how do we empower students in a structured way, of course, at earlier levels of their education? How do we help them have a voice earlier on and not wait for them to have to be in college or graduate school to be able to have some of these conversations or be able to express that voice? And what I love about what you're sharing about this Framingham State example and some of the things that Dan was talking about is that I think that's what happened, right? And I'd love to, it's that real crucial age of 14 to 17, and what would it look like, to do some of those things in some really structured and positive ways even earlier. And so where might we end up later on if we empower those opportunities earlier on?
It's sad to say, but on background or in foreground, depending on your perspective right now, we are seeing an era that school shootings and security on the whole is something that is fundamental to any conversation. It's a sickening reality. I think it just feeds into a broader context of post-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID, increasing loneliness on a societal basis. That is certainly, without doubt, true of all students or student populations. So given the mental health complexities of the moment, given the reality that it seems like every week we've got horrible news about school shootings or violence in general, and even looking at things like I refereed soccer for 20 years, inclusive of high school sports. I got out of that. I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole, because some of the behavior that I observed from coaches and parents, it seems like we're in which is one of the saddest part. It's very sad to me that I'm away from a sport that I loved and played and refereed, but don't want to go anywhere near that environment. How do we get out of this moment of mental health, seemingly spiraling trauma, and achieve those things which you've laid out today and the ideas that are forthcoming when we have this cesspool / totally understandable mental health environment that is looming?
Bartholomew Town.
Are you ready to take the next step in your career? At URI Online, they offer business and leadership-focused programs designed to fit your life. Whether your goal is to advance your career in fields like public administration, supply chain management, or training and development, their online programs provide the flexibility you need with a high-quality education you deserve. Learn more from experienced faculty and collaborate with a network of professionals, all from the comfort of your home or wherever life takes you. Visit uri.edu/online to explore programs and start building your future today. URI Online. Learn anywhere with us. Newport Film is celebrating 15 years of outdoor documentary film screenings every Thursday through August 28th. New critically acclaimed documentaries curated from Sundance, South by Southwest, and Tribeca screen at ever-changing, iconic outdoor locations across Newport and Aquidneck Island. A beloved summer tradition. Pack your blanket and lawn chair. Arrive early for free popcorn, live music, and filmmaker conversations. Head to newportfilm.com for all details. As Rhode Island's first ever member-owned credit union, Navigant Credit Union has been a staple in the local business community for more than 108 years. Yeah, Today, Navigant is a $3.4 billion institution serving more than 136,000 members across 25 physical branch locations. But since its founding in 1915, the mission has never changed. Navigant Credit Union's team of financial professionals have remained committed to improving the financial well-being of the families, businesses, and communities they serve across Rhode Island. Learn more at navigantcu.org. Half Street Group brings a new generation's perspective to leadership communications, strategic public relations, and digital marketing. Half Street helps organizations and leaders take control of their own stories and manage their reputations. They get results for their clients by focusing on audience, message, and culture, and by leveraging their decade-long relationship with media and opinion leaders in the Ocean State and throughout New England. Join me and Half Street Group founder and president Mike Rea for a conversation every month about news of the day, the hottest media analysis, and a look behind the scenes at how impactful leaders drive conversations. Learn more at halfstreetgroup.com.
We are in a mental health crisis. I don't know if crisis is even a strong enough word. And I feel and have felt at times that it becomes that responsibility of fixing that often gets shifted onto K-12 schools to try to address that. And that mentality, that thought process needs to shift. This is an all of us problem. Schools do not have the staffing to address the amount of mental health issues that are happening. I had a school psychologist. I had a full-time school psychologist just for the high school and was maxed out. Our guidance counselors were maxed out. We were bringing in outside agencies to try to help. And I was in a suburban school that, had more money than others. The urbans are even in more dire straits with that. And so I had a conversation recently with some graduates. They're in their early 20s now, getting ready to graduate here in the next year or two. And one of them said to me, "You have no idea the amount of trauma and the amount of things we're dealing with." And this is that 21 to 23 year, age range. I don't have a good answer for that. But we have to continue to talk about it and raise the conversation up, because it's, again, 30 years ago, we just ignored it. Oh, they'll be fine. We buried it. And we've got to continue to talk through it. And we need more support professionals. We need more folks at Bradley and the hospitals. I have students at the college level right now that are like, I need a counselor. I don't know where to turn. And they can't find one because there's not one available here in Rhode Island. And that's a huge problem for us.
Massive. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll echo Dan's thoughts on that. I don't have a good answer to this, right? I think lots of folks are trying to figure out what an appropriate, responsible response to this should be. I think my initial thoughts on this, and something that I've wrestled with. You mentioned sort of post-COVID, and something that I've wrestled with as I think about how we're engaging, or how we're hoping, or how I'm hoping to engage with students at the undergraduate and graduate level in the context of my teaching, is we're receiving students from a K through 12 experience who have gone through a global pandemic, who have been their experiences have been exacerbated by other tragedies, and they are showing up in ways that are demonstrating a sense of distress. And what I've had to do in the conversations I've had with colleagues and friends and folks that teach in our program is, what does it mean to throw away the rules? Like, what does it mean to just reset and not get caught up on what graduate students used to look like or what we expected them to look like? I think it's also about giving ourselves some grace as well. I think we have a very sort of work hard mentality where we're constantly trying to solve issues, we're constantly trying to solve problems because we genuinely care as educators. But I think sometimes we forget to give ourselves grace because other folks aren't volunteering to give us some grace. But I think when it comes to the students, it really is about, to what Dan said, things can't just be what they used to. We can't have those expectations, and we have to dare to dream differently about what education looks like, whether it's K through 12, higher education, or across the K through 20 spectrum.
Super well said, and really appreciate those answers, because I think it's something that, we talk about it, but we don't assess it from that notion of just, hey, sometimes you have to tear something apart and rebuild it. That's just the reality of the world, and especially when we're in such a weird and significant time right now with mental health, particularly youth mental health and student mental health as on the whole. All right, so the Honors Colloquium, Tuesday evenings, 5:30 p.m. is when you'll find most of these events. They're at Edwards Auditorium and also available online. And there's a great array of programs here. Again, this is for the general public. It's not exclusive to URI students or faculty and staff. There's opportunities for the general public here. Anything that you want to sort of add to just the general push to get people on board with what's happening here?
So I think our kickoff on September 16th is really exciting, having a Secretary of Education come to talk about this type of work, but at that highest level is very exciting. And Miguel Cardona is a very talented speaker and very engaging. So I think that is a great kickoff for us. If folks are interested in attending that one, that is a ticketed event. It's free, but they do need to log in. So if you just Google URI Honors Colloquium, it'll take you right to our page. You can reserve a ticket there. But please note that one is a ticketed event. But I'm excited. Richard Culata is coming in. He's the CEO of ISTE and ASCD. He worked for the Obama administration. He's a Rhode Islander. Worked for the Department of Ed here for a little bit. So it's excited to bring him back to Rhode Island to talk about AI and how does that human component work in AI. And then I'm also excited about our last session. It's going to be kind of a TED Talk style. We're going to have a couple of different speakers that look at CTE, the teacher shortage in special education, how do families make choices around schools? And so that charter conversation will come up a little bit in there. And I'm hoping too that we can talk a little bit about finance and the cost to run schools, to build all these brand new beautiful schools that are popping up around the state. I think will be important.
Yeah, I think some of the things, something that I would love to add, I think Dan and I have been really intentional about creating a space of engagement that has a little bit of something for everyone. I think we have a spectrum of educational spaces and places from K through 12 to higher ed, but even within higher ed, individuals that are talking to us about community colleges, which is an underrated and super important space within public education across the U.S. Eric Felix will be joining us from San Diego State to have that conversation. Dominique Baker, who I think will be offering us some really great insight on what does it mean to fund higher education in a contemporary context with all the change that we're experiencing in the recent past and moving into our current presidency and beyond. What does it mean to even afford a post-secondary education environment or opportunity? And then I think we have a couple of folks, Heather Schotten and Terrell Strayhorn, who are going to be offering some really great insight on what does it mean to be what I consider a 21st century college student, right, or higher education professional. What does it mean to belong? What does it mean to find a space that is meaningful to you? What does it mean to be successful in that space? And in particular, what does it mean for us to continue to do good work that supports a variety of individuals in the face of a political environment that maybe doesn't want to honor that as much in the contemporary context? So we have a little bit for everyone, and I think it's a really great place for folks to find something that they'll be able to resonate with across a variety of speakers.
Dan, Lazaro, please, Dan, yeah, please.
Yeah, just one last thing too is that we want to encourage not just the public, but we're trying to do a massive reach out to our principals, our superintendents. Yeah. We want to get students. We want to get high school students involved in some of these as well. So we're reaching out to our CTE teacher prep programs around the state to really expand the opportunities to come hear some great speakers this year.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt about it. And we definitely have a lot of educators that listen to this program because I hear from them. So duly noted. Hopefully, if you're hearing this right now, Dan, Lazaro, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for coordinating what seems to be another round of really great academic, generative activity coming from the University of Rhode Island, my proud alma mater, and also a sponsor here of Bartholomew Town. And hey, uri.edu, and do you have an actual website? I know you just said, let's say it again. I probably should have had this pulled up ahead of time so I can direct people directly there, but let's see. uri.edu.
The easiest route is just to do URI Honors Colloquium.
Yeah, type it
'Cause
in,
is
you'll find it.
Yeah, because it's a longer URL.
And if you can't spell colloquium, no problem. I misspelled it this morning when I was getting some information, and it still brought me there. So there you have it. Dan Lazaro, thanks so much.
Thanks,
you.
Bill. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Will.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,200 local businesses and nonprofits. And 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our more than 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health and dental insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.